hard time. All right. I'm April Margulies.
And I'm Christopher Tompkins.
And you're on the line with the Hype Busters.
Welcome. Ready for some real talk on strategic communications?
You're in the right place. So, Chris, are you ready for a breaking news story?
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
Okay. So this week we are talking about two different news stories.
Yes.
So one is Ellie Kemper's crisis response, too little, too late, or just right. And also Subway's tuna troubles.
Oy vey.
Reminding PR pros to monitor for fishy sentiment. I feel like you have probably something to say about Ellie Kemper. What do you say about Ellie Kemper?
Absolutely. Absolutely. First off, when I saw this story, I was really delighted because when anybody looks too good to be true, it's nice to see that they are. So that kind of gave me a little bit of joy.
Because she seems like so adorable and so sweet and so innocent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of like for her, it's like the moment where like when Anne Hathaway became annoying. You know what I mean? Like everyone has like that turning point.
Oh, phew. Yeah. And for everybody who doesn't remember who Ellie Kemper is, she was one of the sort of semi-stars on The Office as the receptionist. And then she also was in The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
Mm-hmm. And good luck getting through that movie for that show. That was a humdinger, if you will.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. And it was only for Netflix, but it was a humdinger.
I see.
But going into this, obviously, this is all the tones of racism, cancel culture to it. And basically, when she was 19, she was a cotillion. And the organization had racist ties and racist leanings and sexist leanings. So the problem was that she waited to respond. Now, if you read her response, I think she did the right thing. I think she handled it very, very well, because jumping in immediately on things like this with an answer like she provided a couple of days later would seem completely disingenuous. It's about like 5 or 6 slides on Instagram, and it's really thoughtful. And it actually makes me think like, oh, wow, you actually sat down, you talked about it, you thought about it, you talked to some people about it. It made sense to me. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I thought her response was phenomenal. I thought it seemed really genuine and authentic, and that it didn't necessarily just feel like she had a publicist write it for her. I mean, I'm sure she had help, but it didn't feel like just a canned response that wasn't heartfelt. It had a personal touch to it, I thought. If you're accused of, having KKK ties, you're not going to have an immediate response for that. I mean, that's not something you just have at your ready. On a
true.
a different angle, like I was hardly a formed person when I was 19. I hardly knew who I was. I hardly knew what I was doing. I know this isn't the point, but I don't think it's fair to call somebody on the carpet for something they did at 19 and make them respond to it as an adult, as though somehow they're responsible for the thing that they did when they were hardly a formed adult. I mean, I understand that our culture considers people adults around 18, 19, 20, 21, right? But I wasn't. I barely knew what I was doing till I was 30. Like I was a mess. Like I wouldn't want to be held to that standard.
Yeah, I walked out of the womb perfect. The thing with this, she has all the trappings of white privilege, and she has this persona of being this really perfect, nice, perfect person.
Yeah.
And I think those things together really, like, it's like, wow, this is a big takedown. And I don't think it was a fair takedown. And I don't think she actually got taken down. I don't think she has to vanish for a while. I think she can come back on something if someone will hire her, and she's going to be good to go. Yeah,
I agree. I don't think it'll have a long-lasting impact.
Okay, so how about Subway's tuna troubles? Isn't it the grossest? It's the grossest article that I've read.
So the article by Sophie Marowitz from
PR
News. Yeah. So it says, something fishy is happening with Subway's tuna. Or is it?
Yeah, right.
Which is so funny. So for people who are not aware, apparently there was a debate on social media after a New York Times reporter sent samples of the sandwich chain's tuna sandwich to a California lab for DNA testing.
DNA testing
on tuna sandwich. And the lab found that there was no DNA evidence of tuna fish.
But what's also really interesting is that Maury Povich came at the very end and said, "You are the footlong," and which was the joke I've been waiting to tell. But
Oh my God. Wait, so if it's not, there's no DNA traces of tuna, what in the world are they serving?
well, the thing is this: it's
Oh,
it's overly processed, right? So it's processed to the point where you can't tell what it is, and that's what the article was saying. I'm not a big tuna fish buyer in terms of sandwiches
no.
when I go out. It's not something like,
Ew.
ooh, tuna fish. It's like I'm not like 80. The thing is though, with this, it's really important to monitor your mentions. And this is what this article is all talking about. It's the social listening element. That's really important to both sides of our business. I mean, you from the PR world and me from the social media, digital side, we do this every single day. We have Google Alerts, we have listening tools and everything. And as soon as something shady comes out, we put something out to get in front of that story immediately.
Yeah.
Do you think that a lot of brands are really monitoring their sentiment?
Well, I think the issue with Subway is something bigger than that.
Possibly.
I think it kind of goes back to the idea that brands have to actually be doing authentic things so that they're safe and they're communicating
Yeah.
authentically, right? So you can't just have something that's so disgusting and so cheap to make your margins that you're serving something without any DNA relevant to tuna and it's called tuna. I mean, that's
Ridiculous.
that's a business problem. I mean, yes, there's a problem with the social side of it, but I mean it's way upstream, right? Like this is not a
Totally.
downstream problem. This is an upstream problem. So it's like, I mean, I think that's where you gotta
Mm.
it's a good warning, I think, and reminder to brands that if you're doing things that are shady to make ends meet and make a profit, it is gonna come back to bite you at some point. It's just a
But
matter of time.
also, time heals all wounds. Remember all the stuff that we've heard about Taco Bell when that all came out, maybe over a decade ago, maybe. And it was like, it's actually, I don't know what it was. It was like something wrong in their meat, like sheep or something, or I don't
Oh
know. But,
God.
and everyone kind of just went, oh, I really like Taco Bell though. And I think Subway has there's a Subway customer.
Right. It's either somebody that likes and eats there a lot, or it's the kind of thing you kind of suffer through when you're on a road trip because it's the best
Yeah.
option.
Hmm.
So people that are suffering, I think they'll lose those customers potentially, but
Hmm.
they still what are their other options, right? Like
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because the takeaway for both of these is that you should be paying attention. And then one is like respond immediately, and the other one is respond authentically. You know what
yeah.
I mean? It depends on something like this, like, hey, we had a DNA test and this isn't the tuna. Then that was something I would respond to immediately. But like something that's racist or sensitive or something like that, you should really have the right response to go back. So time is of the essence, but you have a little bit more leeway to kind of marinate, I guess.
Do you think it helps because the initial outrage over the KKK stuff in Ellie's case had died a little bit down in 2 days, or do you think that that's not part of the strategy? Was it really just more that she needed to actually have an authentic response that was well crafted and thought out?
I think it wasn't a real brouhaha. I don't really feel like it was a big story. I felt like it was a story that I don't know if it was a slow news cycle or something. It just didn't seem like a top tier news story for me.
Yeah.
And I think it went away really quickly. So even that she said something, I mean, kind of brought it back into the news cycle a little bit. Yeah, I think if it was like a big brouhaha and it was kind of like headline on GMA, Today Show, all these different places, and they were just like really like getting experts in and talking about it day after day, that might have sped things up a little bit.
Okay.
Or she might have actually done interviews if it was that bad.
That's true. I haven't seen anything about that.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Yeah, I just didn't care enough.
Okay. Well, should we move on to point counterpoint?
Oh my God, let's do it. That's my favorite segment ever. Jeez.
So in this segment, Chris and I will agree to disagree, and we'll tell you why.
Yeah, you know I will because I'm always right here. So our topic for this week is, okay, should this make national news? Singing babysitter stuns TikTok after really hard year. It's been absolutely crazy. All right, what say you?
I say no. Honestly, I feel like this is partly why the media is going to lose credibility if it doesn't do something different. This is crazy to me. This should not make national.
God, this is like you sound like me.
I know, it's like role reversal time. I'm going to put on my Chris hat and be a little sour. So I just feel like what has the world come to? And it's also so evident that the mom of the why was she first of all, why was she there if the babysitter was there? Right? Isn't the whole point of having a babysitter so you could do other things? But she's there with the babysitter. The whole thing felt staged to me.
Oh yeah.
And it was all set up. It did not have one authentic feel to it to me. And then
Mhm.
she peppers it through with all these freaking comments about, oh, she doesn't like how she looks in the video, give her some love, whatever. To me, it was like, this is some housewives version of trying to make the babysitter famous via TikTok because she has such an amazing voice. And this is the new way of getting her, 10 seconds of fame instead of putting her on The Voice. And how is
Well,
she just singing along with like an instrumental version? You don't listen to instrumental version of the freaking Little Mermaid soundtrack. You like,
well, you know, it happens. I
no, it
mean,
does not. It
when
does
that
not
when the
just happen.
not
It
Zoe's extraordinary playlist.
I love that show. That's my soapbox about that. What do you think?
Okay, well, the first thing I want to say, has no bearings on this case, is that there was the word babysitter was so much in this article that I actually went and searched where I could watch Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter is Dead because I really like that movie. Do you remember that movie?
No.
It's a classic. It's award-winning film with Christina Applegate from like the 90s.
Oh my god.
Yeah, check it out, folks. You will probably regret it. Okay, so I'm actually more on the side of let's keep this. I'm actually going to be positive on this one. I think stories like this have a place in a really negative cycle. I think stories like this really do buffer really hard news, really tough stuff. We're in a time when everyone is super duper sensitive, obviously. Okay, I completely agree. This is a completely fabricated piece of content, right? But also, I've seen news stories where it's like, 95-year-old woman graduates from college and they're interviewing her. How did she get on there? She called and said, I want to be on. You know what I mean? It's like she had someone get it on there and it's a personal interest story. I think it's something like that. I think it's something nice and light. Everyone likes something a little bit heartwarming. It has a little bit of a Disney angle, just pouring a little sugar onto the mix. Do I find it authentic? No. Do I need to find it authentic? No. It's no one really selling anything. I don't think we're going to be seeing her on America's Got Talent. I think we're going to see her as like singing in one of those shows at Disney World or something.
She'd be great at that.
Perfect.
I see our guests in the waiting room. Should we kick off the interview?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So this week's guest is Tom Briggs. He's the founder of Epigraph Research and Branding Consultancy, and he's here to chat about best practices for branding from whether you're a startup or you're a big marquee brand. So welcome, Tom.
Thank you. So glad to be joining you.
Yes.
So I want to know, I
What do
know
you want
the
to know,
brand.
April? I
I,
mean, just jump in.
I want to know. I want to know, why is branding so valued and so expensive? I know that a lot of branding agencies charge a lot, and sometimes my clients will ask me, why in the world is this so much money? What are they doing? Right?
Let's see. How do I answer that? Well, branding is expensive because branding is a big bucket. I mean, there's so
Yeah.
much that we set on the shoulders of the word brand. I mean, you think about that and your mind immediately goes to logos, typography, colors. But beyond that, there's a level you operate where is it aligned with your organizational values? Is it aligned with the messaging that you're putting out into the world? So, really, yeah, this word brand is so big and nebulous, but to do it right checks a lot of boxes, not only beyond the visuals, beyond the words you're putting out, but I believe It can really be a core fundamental element of creating a visionary organization that is aligned with the values of your founders, that's aligned with the values of your employees, and can really help sort of differentiate and give you a more competitive place in the market and give you, a clear defensible space.
Hmm.
I think it's one of those things where people don't understand how much time actually has to be spent in this process. I've seen a lot of people that want to skip the branding process. They think logo and, just come up with something. And I think that that's really stupid, obviously, because they don't have a leg to stand on, because they have nothing that really shows a value, shows a mission. What do you feel like is one of the first steps in discovering what your brand truly is?
I love Simon Sinek's question, start with why. Why are you in
Yeah.
business? Why are you doing what you're trying to do? What is that positive dent you're trying to make in the universe? Because if you can step back as a founder, or maybe in a conversation with your co-founder, maybe you take a weekend, go get an Airbnb and just really hash that out.
Love that
And
idea.
because if your reason is just to make seven
Hmm.
figures, exit, and go on really sweet vacations, yeah, that's cool. You may have trouble getting people to come along with you on that
Yeah.
journey. So I love seeing brand as a driver of value, starting with those values and saying, you know, maybe we're making 100K in revenue now. What values will be true for us as founders and for our employees when we hit a million, when we hit 10 million, when we hit 100 million, when we hit a billion? I love looking at Zappos and what Tony Hsieh was able to do with that. I mean, their values remained unchanged the bigger they got. I mean, up to the
Hmm.
point, beyond being acquired by Amazon, they always stood for exceptional customer service, and it saw them through all the way, through their growth cycle.
I had even read that internally the brand value was sustained as well, because it was the kind of thing where if you could be hired by Zappos and you had, I think, 30 days to decide whether it was a good fit for you as well. And they were really strict about it. If you didn't fit their culture and you weren't vibing with the existing culture, they basically had some sort of way of buying you out and telling you to go away. I mean, it was like, I'm saying it in a way that doesn't sound nice, but it was actually very nice. I can't remember all the details now, but I remember reading about it and thinking, wow, that's a brand that has both internal and external authenticity, which is really neat to see.
That's such a good point, because your values as a founder or a leadership team only go as far as your people. Are your people bought in? Is this a value that you all believe in, or is it just a bunch of platitudes stuck on the wall? In this day and age where everything is so transparent, that's going to come out in the wash.
When you ask that why question, how many times does your client say, well, that's why I'm hiring you?
It does happen that way sometimes. So at that point, it
Yeah.
becomes a conversation and a working session, and we'll carve out a week. And I've had the good fortune of working with some really awesome brand leaders who've helped, brands like Nike, brands like Sonos, these amazing brand forward companies sort of define who they are. It might not be immediately accessible. It may require some digging. I would say that you need to get to a point where that becomes authentic,
Right.
and that leadership team can say, oh yeah, that's a value we can own and truly mean that. But yeah, definitely it can always be a process, and it's worth investing the time to sit down in a room and do whatever it takes. Your brand values need to be experiential. They may not come out in a sterile conference room looking at a whiteboard. They may
Hmm.
come out in talking to your early stage customers and talking to your founder and talking to your investors, really just saying, what are people so stoked on that they want us to do more of? They
Hmm.
really, yeah. So there's a few different ways you can get to those.
And how do you navigate it when you have those leaders not agreeing on what the vision is or what they think that the values are? I mean, I'm sure that happens too.
Yeah, they're big, hairy conversations, right? I mean, but they're good ones to have at that stage
Yeah.
of the game. Better to know it when you're securing your first round of funding, or when you're just sort of defining these things, versus, when a crisis comes along. By the time a crisis hits, you want to have everything in lockstep. You want to be a tight team with a common theme, because if a crisis hits, as they always do, and you're sort of unsure about this or shaky, you're not going to know what values you're going to stand on, and as a result, you can fall or get set back in your goals, and that can be not a good thing.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Do you
What
typically recommend that clients do branding first before they do any other marketing in terms of SEO, social media, PR, et cetera, et cetera?
I love doing the values work first because it flows into everything. It
Yep.
flows into your publicity effort with the types of media placements you're trying to get. It flows into your messaging. It flows into your website where you're putting it out there and leading with it. So I find it challenging to lead those efforts or execute those efforts without those consistent values. You can do it in sort of a phased approach, or you can do them simultaneously. You could even sort of use those early efforts as, okay, who is our audience? Maybe that evolves. I love, in tandem with solid branding, I'm a big fan of fine audience segmentation. So really getting super granular and naming those audience. It's not 18 through 34 females. It's Molly. Molly lives in San Diego. Molly loves Dutch Brothers coffee. Molly shops at these online stores. Really building out your demographics and psychographics will go a
Mm-hmm.
long ways, and getting those very thin sliced. And knowing I counsel a lot of venture stage companies. Your investors are not your users. So have your deck for your venture investors and then thin slice your audiences. And you may need to have a very uniquely targeted message. It's under your umbrella brand, but you have a very specifically targeted message to each of those named audiences. The way you talk to Tammy, the mom, is different than Greg, the empty nester dad.
I think that branding should come first, personally. I think branding comes first. And I also think that if you're an existing brand, you can use your channels to do the testing of your concepts. But one of the things I was curious about is sometimes when we're working with clients that are working with branding companies and we're seeing the back and forth, we're just like, oh my God, you guys are doing God's work. Like, it's just because I've seen the conversations and I know how hard those conversations are, because you're basically making people look at themselves and then have opinions about visibility and what they look like and their optics. So if you can put together the colors for the client and the imagery and the logo and whatever else will go with your package, and they don't want to go with your suggestions, they want to go in a completely different direction, how do you inform them that this is the direction that they should go in? Not to go against what they want, but they're looking at something like they're not understanding, they're not clicking into why they need to use those colors.
If they're not clicking in, it means on the brand side that I haven't done the work or I haven't shown them the backstory. I remember a few years back, we were doing a rebranding for a technology company with an all male leadership team. They were based out of Syracuse, New York. They were very much tech forward. And we did a study that showed them the competitors in their space, a color study of here's how all your competitors are looking. And we eventually recommended a colorway that the primary color was purple, which for that team was challenging. But we did the research and we showed them if you are purple and you're at a trade show, you are going to stand out from all your competitors. So if you come to the table and show that basis, ultimately you're trying, from the brand side, we're trying to remove it from the realm of subjectivity. If the conversation comes to, well, I just don't like purple, that is a loss because we haven't done the work and said, well, in this
Yeah.
situation, purple is a very good choice. It may be because of competitive differentiation. It may be because, there's deep studies in what color evokes. Maybe we want to
Mhm.
evoke the thing that orange evokes, or red, or green. So there's a lot of tactical work that goes into it, and the onus is on the branding consultant or branding agency or branding provider to show that backstory and say, trust us, A, we're experts, B, we've done the work, you should really go with this recommendation because
Mm-hmm.
it will make you competitively strong.
How long does it normally take to do the full branding process for a company?
Longer than you want it to, always.
what
Plan
are we
on
what are we
taking long.
talking?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, it can take, for all the work that's needed, I think it would be a rush to do it in anything less than a month. And I like a good long quarter to really dive in. If you're diving into customer profiles, you're doing customer interviews, you're really doing your due diligence, you're looking at competitors. Yeah, it takes the time it takes.
And I think a good point to kind of mirror that statement is that a lot of companies that are listening and thinking like, oh God, well, I don't want to spend 3 months doing this. All of the work that they're doing through that branding process is going to save you freaking money. It's going to save you
Mhm.
so much money down the road.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And also the internal and external communications are going to be so much stronger and salient. Where do you find that people along the way, Tom, like where do you find they kind of get stuck the most?
The common pitfalls, one we already talked about, was I don't like X. So if you haven't done the backstory, Another is, well, you can't talk to our customers, or we don't know who our customers are. And that's such a foundational piece of,
Yeah.
there has to be someone, maybe it's a vendor, maybe it's a fellow traveler who bought in early, but you really need to have those conversations and have enough of them so that your sample size is big enough that you're not just getting some aberrant, input. We talked about timelines. It always takes longer, but your branding agency, as you're evaluating them, they should be keeping you apprised of how things are going. If they can't provide you a clear timeline or clear phases of what's going to be happening when, I would take that as a sign of pause. So just do your due diligence like any other vendor. If you're getting weird vibes or if something just doesn't quite feel right, don't be afraid to sort of throw a flag on the play and be like, whoa, can we take a step back? It should be a fun experience. Brand is fun, visuals are fun. These are really interesting things to talk about. Ideally, you should come out of your branding exercises with a greater awareness of who you are, who your customers are. And if you're not getting that from your agency, you may want to reevaluate and make sure, the fit is there.
Mm-hmm.
I have another question that's kind of a follow up to this because it's something else that I've seen a lot in the branding processes. When I was talking to one of my partners, and they were saying that during the branding process, they were supposed to have a call with the core team, which was 3 people, and 10 people showed up on the call. How do you kind of shave people out of that decision making process that are constantly slowing things down and adding in kind of like the elements that aren't necessary to the process? They're not adding value, they're actually just taking away.
It's good to emphasize at the outset that we really prefer one point of contact for consolidated feedback, just emphasizing that, this enables us to operate most efficiently. It allows, the client to have a single brand advocate on their side who's sort of herding the cats or whatever and really waterfalling that information. It does take time, there's a little more
Mhm.
work, but really consolidating it to one individual on the client side really makes for a better experience, both coming and going. On the agency side, having that locked creative brief, the client needs to be a part of that. There needs to be a playback. So after every meeting that you've sat down and you've had a verbal agreement, play it back to the client and make sure, okay, here's where we're at. Are we truly aligned? We verbally agreed. Now let's make sure that our understanding maps to what we talked about. And it just allows for that consistent documentation through the entire process so that everyone is on the same page.
Yeah, it's always about building a case, right?
It is,
Like,
yeah. There's a little bit of CYA involved, unfortunately, and it's not to disparage the client side or the agency side. It keeps everybody on the same page, and it allows for
Mm-hmm.
communication. And on the agency side, you can do a really robust post-mortem. Then, if a project does go sideways, you can dive in and say, okay, where did this start to go off the rails? How might we avoid that in the future
Mm-hmm.
and be informed about
Mm-hmm.
that?
when someone's going through a branding process, when do you feel is the natural point for them to start looking for their PR component, their digital marketing component? They're starting to broaden their team and go out. Is it at the complete end of the branding process?
You may not need to complete it in full. Once you're sort of feeling comfortable that, yes, this is going to be unchanging, this type of photography or these words or this type of language, that's when you can probably start putting stuff out into the world. Really, what you're going for is just that consistency. The fundamental rule of brand is just consistency. It's a consistent presentation of words, images, typography.
Mhm.
Just as soon as you can achieve or start to catch glimpses of that consistency, you can start initiating efforts.
Awesome. Well, Tom, any questions for us or anything you want to plug?
I guess, on the publicity side, what's hot in publicity? What's hot in PR? What should we know or be thinking about as we look at creating brands, creating narrative, creating differentiated organizations?
In terms of what the media is attracted to, they obviously are most interested in something that looks professional.
Mhm.
I think that the more it looks unique and specific, the better. And I think there is a lot of sort of Silicon Valley startup vibe, and it all kind of starts to look the same. I mean, there was an
Yes.
article that somebody wrote, and I think it was in Wired or something. And there was an article about how there was sort of a template now for a Silicon Valley startup design. And it was almost a joke because it was so similar. And I think it's important not to look just like everyone else. We actually had a client once who wanted their website done and we were helping them with that. And they wanted to look exactly like the competitor that they were
Mhm.
actually competing with. I was like,
Yeah.
no. So
Adorable.
can't do that.
think from the digital side, getting clients during the branding process extremely comfortable with video and understanding that the video is a little bit more than just talking to camera. It's a whole different process. So making sure that their video content aligns with their brand and their brand messaging, because let's just say I've seen things, not I have clients like that because that would be incriminating. I've seen things where the company is trying to be super duper cool and they're very slick and they have all these sepia tone images with like light shining in with, you can see the dust through the light. And I got the visual story. And then they're using animations in their video. And it's like, what the hell is this? So understanding that real people do work really well, but getting them ready to utilize that content, because that's what all the platforms are leaning towards in terms of algorithmically being positive for the client.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I mean, in this hyper communicated age, there's definitely emphasis on easily digestible content, easily digestible images, and you see that in a lot of different ways. I'm sure you've had clients come to you and they're like, oh, just make it look like Apple. I love that clean aesthetic. And credit to Apple, they achieved that. I mean, I've heard that enough. I know what that means, but let's run that through your own filter. And if you get a truly collaborative design agency who is willing to walk with you and sort of dive into who you are and what you're all about and give you a really unique look, and honestly be willing to, the elephant in the room is spend the money. I mean, don't go to 99 Designs for your logo. Just don't. I mean, you're going to get what everyone else gets and you're not going to stand out. Invest in the time and the energy to create a really differentiated brand, and you will save yourself money down the road because it will survive. It will survive the ups, it'll survive the downs. And if it's truly tied to those core values of who you are and what you're all about, it will endure and you won't have to refresh it in 3 years.
I agree.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Tom. This has been super fun.
Yeah, just check us out. We're on the socials. So hello Epigraph. If you go there, drop me a line. I'm out in the world, so find me, say hi.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your Monday.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So, Chris, let's do the cash or trash segment. What are we talking about this time?
We're talking about Sprite. Who doesn't love Sprite? Me. Sprite is turning scannable bottles into tickets for virtual hip hop concerts. So is this a cash cow for them, or do we think that this is going to be El Trasho?
I mean, I'm voting El Trasho.
El Trasho? Okay. Doesn't it seem like it's an outdated concept?
It's so forced. No, the whole thing feels like, let's be cool and hip and modern and get a hip hop audience. And you're like, wow, you're out of touch.
Yeah, dude, Sprite, calm down. I mean, Sprite's kind of coming off like a little thirsty turtle on this.
Yes.
And doesn't this seem off brand for Sprite? Because I feel that Mountain Dew, this seems better with, maybe.
Right. Sprite's trying to go in this direction. If it were like tickets to the US Open, that I could see.
Tickets to the US Open. Oh, damn, Molly. With my Sprite Zero.
I mean, it's still weird.
I love that you made Sprite the Connecticut sister to Mountain Dew. It's like, what? Okay.
That's what it feels like.
I think as soon as I saw the word scannable, I was like, what? It's like I got something the other day and it had a QR code on it. And I was like, really? What do you think about, I'm just talking about like, just kind of talking here. What do you think about QR codes? Do you think QR codes are past it?
I mean, now that every restaurant has them for the freaking menu, yes.
That's true.
It's not cool anymore. Now it's just a normal thing that you have to do instead of getting a freaking menu, which is annoying.
QR codes, though, as a trend, does feel a little like walking with a walker with the tennis balls in the bottom. Like, I don't feel like it's like a fresh, cool concept. Because I could understand maybe for a trade show or something that would make sense, but Sprite and hip hop concerts, like I just don't feel like the match is there, and I think it's a desperate ploy to open up their trash fun. Yeah, that is.
All right,
trash.
well that was an easy one.
Okay, that was fantastic, everybody.
Poor Sprite.
Poor Sprite. You know, who cares? They have enough money. They're in the Hamptons right now.
with their Connecticut sisters.
Right now, Sprite is vacationing with the Kennedys. Oh
And their
no!
skirts. They're all
Yeah.
wearing skirts and
Oh my god.
visors.
Oh my god. Talking about like our interview earlier, this is like branding central. Like this is like coming up with a Sprite. Abigail and Chad. Oh, would you like to see Sweetie, darling, in concert? Oh, yes, I do.
The funny thing is, it's just in my head that that's who drinks Sprite. I have no idea because I don't.
So, Trash Sprite, try again. Thank you for a stupid summer story.
Okay.
Okay, so we have another cash or trash here. This one's a little bit different because we're going to be talking about retailers turning to viral TikTok moments for sales gold. And it's lots of really big brands, Lululemon, Gap. Gap actually had such a viral moment that one of the hoodies that they just kind of popped up was picked up by an influencer, and it became so popular that it was just brought back into rotation, and they're going to release it again. So that actually brought back a completely new style. So what it's saying is that a lot of these brands are turning to these influencers instead of doing the advertising themselves. So they're kind of counting on influencers to pick up their goodies, wear them, and turn them into sensations. So they are laying off their own marketing on TikTok and really relying on these influencers. Now, these influencers are not going to be like April Margulies' cousin, Kim Kardashian, like that level. They're more like micro and nano, which could be anywhere from like 100 to maybe 1,000 or even 10, because those people have such engaged audiences that they do become influencers to those individuals. So I love this trend. It's not the influencers that are the ones that are basically like, here's me in a bathing suit looking over my shoulder and holding like a bag of Tang or something. Like, I mean, it's a little bit different. What do you think about this? Do you think this is cash, or do you think this is trash or trash?
What's nice about it is that, I mean, if they're giving away product to influential teenagers who are going to wear it and then post it or whatever, in a way, it's a little bit more authentic,
Yes.
I guess, doing it that way. I think my concern is more around the culture of everyone now thinks they're an influencer.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way, that is kind of where things have gone, where there's an equal weight between consumers and brands where there didn't used to
Mm-hmm.
be. And so it kind of points out that I think it seems smart. I have cultural concerns about it, but I put it in the cash category in terms of what I think.
Think about it like this, that I can probably convince you. Think about all of the models that are going to be used in these campaigns, whether it be on television, whether it be on print or on television. They're getting paid to endorse something so people can look to them as influencers. I think it's really good. I think it's exactly the same thing as advertising. And I think it's cool that you can see what your friends are doing and like, oh, they're doing something cool. I like that. I want to try it out. I do that, but I don't think I would want to be the person that's influencing. I don't think that would be my thing. I wouldn't want everyone biting off your style, biting off of what you like. I think that's a little creepy. But like, I mean, I can't go out the door without my Lululemon skirt. So I support that trend. So I'm going to say cash for this. I like it.
Cool.
Business trends.
What's the business trend of the day?
Oh, you got it. Just this one, folks. The resignation economy. Okay, doesn't that sound absolutely like annoying? As soon as I heard the term resignation economy, I thought of 4-hour work week and I immediately got angry. But the resignation economy and how it's going to affect people getting back to work. So pretty much the resignation economy is after everyone's been like working from home and working remotely, it's kind of like, hey, I kind of like doing my own thing in my own space and not going into the office. So what's happening is a lot of people are moving back into offices and moving back into the day to day. And they're saying, no, I'm really enjoying my life now because I can see my kids more. I'm with my pets more. I can make my own schedule. I can work for virtually anyone from anywhere just by having a computer.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of employers, just like me, are seeing that employees are becoming very expensive when you're doing new hiring. because everyone's like, I make my own hours, I make my own thing, I make my da, and there's lots of different impacts. What do you think about this resignation economy?
I think it was around before the pandemic. I have a unique take on it since our agency is virtual.
Yeah.
So most of the people that are working for trust relations fall into this category of wanting to do their own thing on their own time in their own space, maybe needing to be able to have the flexibility of where they work from because of their husband's jobs, maybe just wanting that in general because they also on the side are a model or they're a boxing instructor or they're a minister or I mean
And
that
what colorful lives your staff lead. Are these real? Are you just making these up? I mean, these are really interesting.
These are real.
Oh, that's cool. I like that. I love these
So
side hustles, minister.
So, I mean, it's like, I appreciate that because I have my own personal passions too. And on the side, I like to write music and I'm in a band and, so I respect people having other passions beyond work that need tending to, that are sort of like children. So sometimes they have actual children and that's the thing that needs the flexibility. Sometimes it's just this other thing that they have. And I think that it leads to a richer, fuller, more interesting person. To your point, your reaction's like, wait, what is this real? And it is real. And I think that, clients are interested in talking to people that have that much dimension and depth too, right?
Right.
I can see that that's disruptive to a company that's not already built on that being foundational. So the culture does seem very challenging to other companies that are used to doing things in a more traditional way.
The Go agency is in 12 years of business. So when we started, having a virtual agency was looked down upon because we had to build up an authentic base. It's different now. If I were to start it again, I would do more virtual. So we do have an office building. All of our employees are local, so they can go to the office. And I mean, obviously, it's with these times, it's been a little bit different. We've been mostly virtual, but I've been moving into adding more virtual staff because I want to be able to, start going to a larger pool because I found how easy this works. So for a company like me, it was cool until I had to start hiring people. And what I want to talk about is the other part of this. The people that have resigned, a lot of them are in food, beverage, bars. Like when I put up some entry level jobs, I would say almost 80% of the people that had applied were waiters and waitresses. And that's not normally how it is, but they're just stopped and they're like, I can work from anywhere. I can do this. I can stay home. I can have, because a lot of people are worried about like having babies, getting pregnant. How am I going to do this? How are we going to do this with your schedule? And it's kind of like opening up their minds to all these different options. So I think it's going to hurt industries that require in person, even though I do feel like they're always going to be there. And I think also it may create a lot of noise for people that are looking for quality, qualified candidates. That's like a little bit of a downside. I think the upside for me is that as an agency, it's allowed, like you were talking about, the seeing the freedom that everybody has and that you can have it all in a way. As long as you can work your hours, get your job done, and be responsible. But we were all kind of forced to do that. So
when you spend time doing things you love, then I find that people are more present when they're there for work too, right? Because a lot of times if you force people to work long hours and they're not getting to do the thing that they're really passionate about in addition to work, not that they're not passionate about their work, but they're not getting to their book club or I mean whatever it is, right? Whatever it is that fills them and gives them a sense of purpose, right? I mean, if you don't have that, then I find that people start to kind of goof off, space off. Yeah, you get more hours out of them, but are they actually productive hours, or is it better to just let them take a 3-hour break and go do whatever they're doing and then come back to it when they're fresh and mentally present again,
It's an interesting concept to think about. I think that there's pluses and minuses, and I'm hoping that we can kind of find a healthy way through this because I don't think it's all the way one way or the other is the answer. I think it's different strokes for different folks.
Yeah. I agree with that.
And that was the only business trend that I packed in my suitcase today. What up? Enjoy.
It was great.
Thanks.
Okay, so should we do the closing?
Yep. Okay. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Hype Busters.
And thank you to Tom for a great interview.
have questions about the news, companies, and conversations from the show this week? Yeah, probably, right? So you'll find our contact details in the show notes below.
And our DMs are always open for the news, companies, and suggestions that you want to hear about next. And if you're looking for a chance to put your brand in the hot seat, we want to hear from you.
All right. So see y'all next time for more real talk on strategic communications with me, Chris, and her, April.
April. And then Aeropostale.
Aeropostale.
Is that how you pronounce it? I don't know. Abercrombie and Fitch.
Don't say any more names.
Okay, cut out all
Tamart?
of that.
Is it Target?
I knew Lululemon.
You did. You nailed that one.